All right, Alexander, let's talk about the $1.9 trillion stimulus. It's passed the House. It's going to go to Biden's desk. He is going to sign it. And we're going to get a massive, massive cash injection into a part of the U.S. economy. There's a lot of it that'll go elsewhere as well. But let me read you two headlines here. One is from the Chicago Sun-Times, and another one is from Business Insider. And I'll start with Business Insider first. They say not a single Republican in either chamber of Congress voted for Biden's $1.9 trillion stimulus package. So they're using this to hit the Republicans with. And Business Insider is a Democrat-friendly publication. And there are a lot of other articles which are blasting the Republicans for not going along with the stimulus. The Chicago Sun-Times article is actually, I think you'll have a lot more to say about this one because you'll talk about the economic implications of this stimulus. The title says, by actually governing, this is the title, by actually governing, Biden proves to be the un-Trump. That is the un-Trump, un-Trump, un-Trump. When people are going to ball games, when the economy's growing and life feels like normal again, any GOP plans to sandbag Democrats in midterm elections may not work out. That is the Chicago Sun-Times, and I think that speaks to perhaps the plan for Biden and the Biden White House and the Democrats is that this stimulus will seal up the midterm election win for them because the economy is going to just rev back up and everything is going to boom because of this $1.9 trillion stimulus. Of course, the Republicans have other ideas and other thoughts. So, Alexander, what do you make of what I've just read you and in general about the $1.9 trillion stimulus?
Well, let's first of all start with the point about the Republicans. It's just a few weeks now that Joe Biden came along, said that he was going to govern the United States in a bipartisan way. He was going to reach out to the other side. He was going to be the president who was going to pursue a unity and, bring together the United States and its various different peoples and parties and political movements, in contrast, supposedly, to Donald Trump, who allegedly, trampled over other opinions as he pursued his own views. And here we see what all those, statements about bipartisanship actually amount to. We've seen a president, or rather an administration, which has rammed through this massive stimulus package. It's not heeded any real concerns from the Republicans. It's not negotiated with them in any serious way. It's used in its majorities in the Congress to ram this plan through, ignoring all concerns that the Republicans have expressed. Now, that's one thing. So, bipartisanship, on this channel, we never took any of that seriously, but I think any idea that it exists is now dead and buried. Secondly, this plan, this massive stimulus plan, is going to, as you rightly said, fire up the US economy in an astonishing way. It means that the US is going to run this year a projected 15% budget deficit, 15% of GDP. I mean, this is unprecedented. And what is really bizarre about this is that this is happening against the backdrop of an economy that is recovering strongly. Now, again, on the Duran, we discuss this often. We discuss this right the way through the pandemic crisis of 2020. We said that the steps that Donald Trump was taking, both with respect to the economic measures he'd taken and with respect to, the medications and all of those other things, they were going to cause the US economy to start to recover, and it would start to recover very strongly in the second part of 2020. And that, by the way, is what has happened. And in fact, that recovery has been gaining steam. The US economy is recovering very strongly. Now, on top of that, we have what I think is the biggest package, stimulus package, in US economic history in peacetime, at least since the Second World War, at least since the time of the Great Depression. But of course, there is no depression because, as I said, the economy is recovering and there is no actual crisis. So what is the justification, the economic justification for this thing? Yes, people have had a very hard time. Yes, some degree of support for them as the economy, comes back into, harness, into full activity is justified. But on this scale, which is unprecedented, it seems to me that it is economically both unnecessary and unwise. What we're going to start to see in the second half of this year is the first telltale signs of an economy that is overheating. We are going to hit the buffers sometime in the middle of this year. We're going to start to see inflation starting to tick up. And in the meantime, we're going to see inflationary pressures grow, which they are already doing around the world. We see oil prices are rising, we see food prices around the world are rising, and we're going to see something starting to happen across the entire world economy, and of course within the United States itself as well. But what is the reason for this? Well, I think there are two reasons. Firstly, this is a package which is built again, created again, very much to suit the various parts of the Democratic Party's coalition. So it gives AOC what she wants. It gives, everybody basically a bit of what they want. In fact, more than a bit, quite a lot of what they want. But overall, and overriding all of this, it's exactly what you said. Get the US economy driving forward on all cylinders, create the appearance of prosperity, and then that will get you through the midterms, and perhaps, hopefully, you gamble, it might get you past 2024 also. This is a politically driven thing. And it reminds me, and I actually did a program on my own channel about this, it reminds me very much of Barack Obama's actions during the 2009 crisis. It's often said that Obama has regretted that he didn't go for a bigger stimulus then, and felt that the fact that the economy didn't grow fast enough after 2009 was one of the reasons why eventually Donald Trump won the 2016 election. And this seems to me in large parts, to be driven by that concern. In other words, a desire to get the economy driving forward as fast as possible, making people feel more prosperous, and at the same time hope that will prevent the Republicans gaining control of Congress in 2022 and prevent Donald Trump or someone like him coming and winning the presidency in 2024. And at the same time, of course, consolidating the Democratic Party's hold on power. The danger is that what they are actually doing is doing the same thing that previous Democratic administrations have done. Lyndon Johnson's administration in the 1960s, which also went for an absolutely unfunded boost to the economy with the Great Society program, and of course that led to the inflation of the 70s and the fact that the United States had to come off break the link between dollar and gold in 1971, and of course also the Clinton administration in the 1990s. They didn't pursue fiscal stimulus then, but they pursued very, very loose monetary policies, again to keep the economy hot, and that led to the unsustainable dot-com boom, and then to the mortgage crisis, which paved the way eventually for the financial crisis of 2008. So this is, it seems to me, what the danger in these policies is, that you drive the economy too far, too fast in a short time, and the result is that you're going to be hit by inflation, you're going to be faced with all sorts of problems going down the road. Either you have to put up interest rates, which I predict they will vigorously resist having to do, or cut back spending, which they're also going to resist doing, in which case we could be very well looking at either major problems in the financial system, as we had in 2009, or perhaps more probably higher inflation as we had in the 1970s. But that is where we're going. Maybe not not before 2002, maybe not before 2024, but sooner or later, that's where we're going to be. I said 2002, I meant 2022.
So that was my question to you. You're saying that the U.S. is going to experience an economic boom, or it'll appear that it's experiencing an economic boom, and that'll take them past 2024. After 2024, they'll have won the presidency, theoretically, because you're looking at such a boom that everyone's going to vote Democrats, Kamala, whoever. They're not going to care, and then eventually it'll crash. But the crash is, you're saying sooner rather than later. I mean, what's sooner? I mean, 2024 is a long ways away. I mean, this is going to buy them.
It's a long way.
Listening to you, this seems like it's I don't want to say a smart move, but politically, if this goes as planned, then they've sealed up the midterms and the election 2024. Once again, theoretically, hypothetically speaking, if this goes as planned, obviously a lot of unforeseen things can happen. But I mean, 2024, that's 4 years. You're looking at a 4-year boom. Is that really what this is going to do?
I don't think it's going to last for 4 years. I don't think the economy is in a condition to keep running hot like this for full years. I'm not even sure it will continue until 2022, actually. I think, as I said, it's far more likely that we're going to hit the buffers sometime later this year, and we're going to start to see inflation rise in the second part of this year. Maybe not so much as to put pressure on interest rates. But remember, if you don't deal with the inflation quickly, it tends to start to grow. So I don't think it's going to get them past 2022. And I certainly don't think it's going to get them past 2024. And by the way, I mean, I'm not the only person who thinks that. Even Democrats like, Larry Summers and Olivia Blanchard, who are people who've always, supported stimulus packages and who are committed Keynesians, think that this is reckless and is going to fail. But this is the plan. It is to get the economy, to turbocharge the economy, to get it firing up on all cylinders, get a boom going, and hope that you're able to surf that boom past the 2022 and 2024 elections. I think it's a reckless gamble. I don't think it's going to work. In the short term, you will get a boom. And of course, initially, inflationary booms can be very exciting and people can feel, very prosperous during them, as they did in the 1960s. In the late 1960s, this was a time of great economic optimism in the United States, even as other things in the United States were going very badly wrong. There was the war in Vietnam, there were the problems in the cities, the protests in the cities, but at that time, the United States seemed to be economically booming, but it was an unsustainable boom which led directly to the worldwide inflation, which hit the United States itself very badly in the 1970s, and which required very tough action by the Federal Reserve Board under Paul Volcker in the early 1980s to get that inflation under control. It seems to me that we're seeing that whole thing replay itself all over again. Only the difference is what was sustainable for a couple of years in the 60s when the US economy was differently structured from the way it is today, I don't think is sustainable now. And I don't think there's any economist who think it is. At least none of the economists whom I know and whom I am reading. And I read economists both on the left and on the right. But the problem with this administration is, as we've discussed many times, these people have no reverse gear. They don't know how to, pull back. The Democratic Party coalition is now very unstable. It brings together many different people with very different views, and people like AOC have completely bought into this idea, for example, of modern monetary theory. They think they can keep the economy running hot pretty much indefinitely because they believe that the magic money tree, if you like, has been discovered. So there's people like that. And of course, they are powerful at the moment. And last but not least, there is no president in the White House who has the ability to rein this thing in, because Biden cannot do or won't do what Barack Obama did in 2009, which is at least speak to the Republicans. I mean, Biden isn't even doing that. He had this one meeting with a group of Republican senators. He listened to them for about 2 hours, and as we all know, his chief of staff, Mr. Klein, basically said no on his behalf. So there we are.
Who benefits from this hot economy? Who's going to benefit? Because, I mean, you have a lot of businesses have closed or are going to be closing. You have a lot of people that are struggling to get by in the U.S. Who's going to benefit from an economy that just just goes through the roof? A lot has changed in the U.S. when you compare it to the 1960s as well, and I'm specifically talking about stuff like manufacturing and things like that. I mean, who's going to benefit from all of this?
I mean, the US today is a completely different economy from the 1960s, which is why I said an unsustainable boom in the 1960s could be sustained for a couple of years. I don't think it can be today. And as I said, if we're talking about inflation, there are already clear signs of inflation starting to take hold, with food prices rising around the world, with oil prices rising. And by the way, the steps the administration is taking, closing the Keystone pipeline, taking steps against frackers, people of that kind, that is, of course, going to drive oil prices up even further, because you see the Green New Deal sort of people, they're insisting on having their way, and there is no one in the White House able to make decisions about which priorities should be followed. So they're trying to do everything at once, and at the same time they're pushing the foot down on the accelerator. Who is going to benefit? In the short term, everybody will seem to. As we see the economy start to zoom upwards, we will see people with small businesses, people like that, they will feel for a time better off. But if this doesn't last very long, to be absolutely clear about this, inflation, if it comes, hits middle-class people most of all. They are the savers. They are the people with what economists call stickier income levels. They can't raise their wages. They can't force rises to their wages as easily as some workers, say industrial workers can. So they will come under tremendous pressure. So will people who run small businesses. The people who will benefit, the people who always benefit in high inflation situations, are those people who are already billionaires, who already have enormous amounts of wealth concentrated in their own hands, because their asset prices will rise even faster than the rate of retail inflation will, because as the rate of retail inflation goes up and people sense that the price of money is in effect falling, people will look to try and secure their savings by buying up assets, like properties and stocks and shares and things of that kind, which in a way ultimately will trickle into the hands of the oligarchs. So what we will see if there is inflation is we will see higher inequality, even higher inequality in the end in the United States, and the middle classes and the entrepreneurial class will be hammered.
On balance, do you think this is a smart political move from the Biden White House? And do you think this is a smart economic move or bad political move, bad economic move, or mixed bag? Just how would you rate this on balance?
I think this is a bad move all round. Can I just say one thing? It's such a contrast with what Donald Trump did. Donald Trump came in. He didn't go in for massive stimulus packages, which is what the Democrats seem to love. What he did was he carried out a major tax reform. And that tax reform has now been analysed and understood. And what people have found, and it's not what the Democrats have repeatedly said about it, what they've discovered about that tax reform is that it actually lowered the tax burden on lower and middle income people. The reason all those millions of people voted for Donald Trump in the election, one of the reasons they voted for Donald Trump, is because through his tax change, he did actually make their life better. It is a completely wrong claim that you constantly heard people make, which is that this tax reform benefited the rich at the expense of the poor. In reality, it did the opposite. And it provided the basis for economic growth, sustainable economic growth. This kind of enormous surge in spending is not going to do that because, in my opinion, you asked me whether I think this is a smart move. I think it is a dumb move because you already have an expanding economy. So why overheat it? It doesn't make any kind of sense to me. If you overheat the economy in that kind of way, you will create all kinds of economic problems going down the line, and ultimately you will turn more people against you. All those middle class people who voted for Joe Biden because they thought that, he was somehow better than the bad orange man, they're going to be hit in their savings and their incomes by higher inflation, as they may very well be, are going to find that Joe Biden has come with a very heavy price.
All right. We'll leave it there. Big stimulus. Wow. 1.9 trillion.
Well, and apparently, and now Biden is talking about yet another one on top of the one he's just had. I mean, we're, stimulus without end. I mean, bear in mind, we've had stimulus without end on top of quantitative easing without end, monetary loosening plus stimulus on this scale. As I said, we've never seen anything like this before. And I have to say, it gives me vertigo just looking at it. I remember very well what you said to me once, not on one of these programs, that the problems for the United States would come if Biden were ever elected. That the United States is this enormously powerful, strong country, could withstand many things, but if Biden is elected, it will run into many problems. And I feel that those words are now gaining prescience when I see something like this.
Real quick, what's the absolute worst thing that you can see coming from this stimulus? I mean, if you had to say, my God, this could be a disaster, what do you foresee happening to the economy or even the global economy?
I'll tell you what I think would be the absolute disaster if we start to see inflation really take off in the United States.
Like what? Like what?
Going above 5%. And the Federal Reserve boards won't raise interest rates in order to choke it off. If it doesn't do that, then the real risk is that inflation will go on rising even further. And we could be looking at 10% inflation or even more. Tim Congdon, who is a British economist, has already talked about that as a real possibility. And I have to say that raising interest rates has become extraordinarily difficult to do because there is so much debt around. If I have to make a choice, I think better raise interest rates and choke off inflation than allow inflation to rip, because I think inflation in the long term is a greater problem for the United States and the world economy than raising interest rates would be. But that, for me, would be the great danger. And I have to say, there are increasing numbers of voices. I mean, people like Peter Schiff, for example, Mitch Feinstein, people like that, who are saying that it has become politically impossible for the Federal Reserve Board to raise interest rates in the way that Paul Volcker did in the 1980s. Paul Volcker raised interest rates, choked off inflation, stabilized the dollar, and paved the way for a steady economic growth in the United States in the decades that followed. That achievement of Volcker's has been steadily undermined for many, many years. It worries me now that what is happening is going to bury it.
Yeah, but what does that mean? Practically speaking, 10%. Practically speaking, what is? And
Okay,
you can't raise interest rates.
Okay.
I mean, for everyone listening, what is?
I mean,
you say that's a disaster,
yeah.
and I understand that, but what does that really mean?
Yeah, I mean, well,
10% for Americans, for the world.
Yeah, I mean that's the danger, you see, because you see, if we start to see inflation at say 3-4%, if inflation starts to rise at that point, then as I said, if the Federal Reserve Board raises interest rates to 3-4%, we will see a recession. I mean, to be absolutely clear, I mean, at that point, debt becomes incredibly difficult to handle, and we will see a recession. But if inflation goes up beyond that, and the Federal Reserve Board is eventually, against all its wishes, forced to raise interest rates to 10%, then we're not going to see a recession. We're going to see a major economic crisis, because with the levels of debt that we see now, with the levels of government debt that we see now, which of course the Biden administration is increasing. I mean, you can't run a budget which is a deficit which is 15% of GDP without creating debt. I mean, this is debt issuance on a scale like we've never seen before. If you do that and you start pushing up interest rates, then government bonds, the cost of the governments around the world, including the US government, repaying all that debt is going to rise massively. And we will face at that point, I suspect, some kind of a mortgage crisis and a debt crisis in corporate America. So if you have to raise interest rates, if inflation is taking off, you need to do it fast. Because if you delay, then the whole thing can spiral out of control. And at that point, we will be in real trouble. But Peter Schiff, Mitch Feinstein, those sort of people are saying that the United States Federal Reserve Board is going to delay raising interest rates because it's become so politically and economically difficult to do. Sometimes, if the choice is between a recession and a depression, however difficult a recession is, better the recession and get it out of the way than go for a full-blown depression. But that, I'm afraid, is what we could end up with.
Right. The US dollar, what happens to the USD in this case?
Well, it's already been weakening, and I predict all this is going to weaken it further, unless, of course, markets start get the sense that the Federal Reserve Board is going to do the right thing and is going to start raising interest rates. If the Federal Reserve Board raises interest rates in a timely way, the dollar will strengthen. The risk is, as I said, that the Federal Reserve Board won't do that, in which case if we get very, very high inflation, people will not want to hold dollar assets. They'll become skeptical about the value of the dollar, and it will weaken even more at a time, of course, when the dollar is facing challenges from other currencies which it didn't face in the 1970s. I mean, in the 1970s, there was no other currency system that could rival the dollar. Today there is. Not the euro, by the way, but I mean, there's the RMB, the Chinese RMB. There's baskets of currencies there's all sorts of possible options for people to go outside the dollar. Already, we're starting to see more and more countries making transactions outside the dollar. So I'm afraid this is a high wire act that the United States is going to be embarking upon. And as I said, it is unnecessary. Why overstimulate the economy at this time when it is already growing and recovering strongly? There doesn't seem to me any logic to this. This is, as you rightly said, being driven by the political needs of the Democratic Party and its imperative, the political imperative of keeping all the various factions of the Democratic Party's coalition satisfied by giving each of them what they want.
All right, we will leave it there. Alexander Reckers, thank you very much. Guys, go to the Duran shop, pick up some merch and long sleeves, magic mugs. Got all kinds of great stuff.
Absolutely amazing.
Yep, go ahead.
Absolutely, and long sleeves, hats, hoodies, sweatshirts, all those amazing things in our shop. And as Alex said, PayPal, Patreon, Subscribestar. Don't forget our Discord server. We accept payments in all sorts of currencies now, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and all the others. And check out our other platforms, as Alex said, BitChute Library, especially Odyssey, and please make sure that you're subscribed to this channel because we have had all kinds of problems with that. And please also subscribe and look up our other channels too. Mine, Alex's, the new one where we do the interactions with our viewers. You will find links under this video. And have a great day, and we look forward to seeing you again.
All right, take care, everybody.